Am I okay from your?
Yeah, you're perfect, Chris. Yeah, okay. That'll work.
Good.
Awesome. All right, here we go. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Double Digit Hockey Podcast. I am your host, John Easthope, and today I am joined by a very special guest, one of the guys I looked up to in the broadcasting world. And I'm so grateful that he's taken some time out of his busy schedule to join me on the show today. Chris Cuthbert joins me. Chris, how are you today?
I'm good, John, and it's good to be with you.
Thank you for joining me so much for this. We all know, love your voice across Hockey Night in Canada. Those of us who are old enough to remember the CFL on CBC. How great is it to you to be back on Hockey Night in Canada calling hockey games now?
Well, it's good. I started on Hockey Night in 1984 and then had 20 years. And then 15 years I was off the show. And I think a lot of people, there's a whole generation that are kind of thinking I'm a first-time rookie, and sometimes I feel like that, but other times I feel like probably the grizzled old guy that I am.
Do you miss calling football games yet?
I miss the Canadian Football League. I'm gonna miss the actual call when there are games out there that I'm not doing. So yeah, that was the downside of the decision. There were lots of positives, but I had a good run. I think I was involved in 25 different Grey Cups, and when I kind of was making the decision, I thought, how much more is there? Every team in the Canadian Football League, I had the privilege of calling a Grey Cup championship with. So it was kind of fitting that Winnipeg was the last team to do that, and my last Grey Cup.
That was a good Grey Cup too, as well. You had the opportunity to work in the bubble in Edmonton, calling all of those hockey games. That's a busy schedule, multiple games a day. How much did you enjoy that process of being with the bubble in Edmonton there?
Well, I think for me it was especially advantageous because I was joining a new team, and it was kind of like getting thrown into the deep end. And I think we did 40 games in the first 40 days, and in all 45 games, I never thought I'd ever get an opportunity to call 2 game sevens on the same day, but that happened as well. After the kind of year we've had and are still having, it was just great to be back at work and great to have that opportunity. And it was a unique one for a hockey guy to be immersed in that bubble experience. I wasn't right in the bubble. I could go back to the hotel, I could walk around town, but to be in that kind of hockey hothouse for a couple of months was a great way to get back into it. Especially with the experience I had with a number of all the Western Canadian teams. So it kind of got me, it gave me a bit of a leg up getting ready for an all-Canadian division the next year.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's still not back to normal yet. Now we're back to calling hockey games, though. How different is it calling a game between now and when it was in the bubble?
It's actually it's pretty similar, really. I guess the only difference is you're on road trips. I've been in Calgary. I've been back in Edmonton, of course, and doing games in Toronto and Ottawa. This week or next week, I'll be out to Montreal for my first game at the Bell Center, which, when it's full, is my favorite rink to do a game. Obviously, without fans, it's a whole different animal, and as good as it is to do games right now, it's going to be a lot better when we get fans back in the buildings.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So you get a chance to travel around there, and you have a traveling companion of sorts with Mr. Simpson there. How is it working with Craig Simpson?
Well, it's been great, and it's a pairing I never expected because he's such a long and that's such a great partnership between him and Jim Hewson, and under any normal circumstances you wouldn't break that up, but because Jim is unable to travel this year, that it made it a new team, and I think I'm up to 46 different hockey color commentators, but Craig's up there near the top of the list, and it really is a pleasure to work with him. I will say, though, that it's been a little bit different this year because, we get together in the booth. We're separated by that piece of plexiglass, but there's there's no dinners the night before, there's no glasses of wine or beer after the game, where you really, I think form a different level of bonding, and I'm looking forward to that eventually too.
I'm glad you mentioned Jim in your answer there, because I was going to ask you about what's it like filling in for a guy like Jim Houston on a broadcast. Big shoes to
Jim,
fill?
enormous. Jim and I go back. We actually auditioned for the same job. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but back in, I think, 1983, it might have been 82, but it was 82, 1982. The Leafs had an opening, a job opening, and I had done some work for the Montreal Manic soccer team, which was owned by Molson's, and Molson owned the production house that was the Canadian Sports Network.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Hewitt had retired. Danny Gallivan was about to retire, and suddenly they were looking for new talent. Bob Cole had moved in to Hockey Night in Canada, but they were looking for more play-by-play guys, and I think it came down to two or three of us. But Jim and I were both in the same audition, and he got the job. And I knew even in the audition I was not ready. I think I was a year out of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, doing Saskatchewan junior hockey. So it would have been too much too soon for me. And he was ready and was terrific at it. And we've been together, or we've been kind of in this business, running parallel careers for a long time. And he is among the guys I respect most in this business. He is an outstanding voice, outstanding play-by-play guy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jim myself. I love his plays. I love how he brings the games to life. So you're broadcasting a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf games and a lot of those Eastern teams. So I wanted to kind of get into what you're seeing from those teams early in this new season. Let's start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. What have you seen from Toronto so far in this season?
Well, I think we've seen a team that has come somewhat as advertised. I think everybody thinks of the Leafs as this offensive powerhouse, but a team that has not had success in the postseason, maybe because their defensive play hasn't been good enough. I think they're vastly improved defensively this year. I think people have been wanting more offensively. I thought it was going to come, and it certainly did against the Vancouver Canucks on Thursday night. So I think the Leafs are on the right path, and I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with this year. There hasn't been a lot of adversity. They did lose Joe Thornton and then Travis Dermott, at least for a short period of time. Nick Robertson as well, but for the most part, they have been a set lineup and have looked good. So I would say so far so good for the Maple Leafs, for the most part, as advertised.
Yeah, they got a pretty big boost last night from one old Jason Spezza scoring the hat trick there. Maybe a word on Jason Spezza and what you've seen from him so far this year.
It really is an amazing story. I think that there were people that thought his career was done in the late stages in Dallas. I think there was a level of frustration for him there. And, he's one of those great players like Joe Thornton, who has done just about everything, but is still chasing the cup. And so he takes a minimum salary to play at home and believe he's got an opportunity. And, they call him vintage, and that was a vintage performance on Thursday against Vancouver. I had the good fortune of watching him play I was a season ticket holder of the Brampton Battalion, and he was 15 playing before he was even drafted. He could play in Brampton as a 15-year-old because he had residence in the city. And so I've always kind of watched his career closely. I was thinking the other day that it's a shame that in his prime, he missed the 04-05 season, a lockout season, because he'd be 1,000-point guy. And would we look at Jason even more seriously if back then he was putting 80, 90 points on the board? If he was already at, 1,030, 1,050 points, would we be looking at him even harder as a Hall of Fame candidate. But he's a guy that's always had a great passion for the game and an exceptional playmaker. It's funny that suddenly a goal scorer now on the fourth line for the Leafs. So pretty valuable guy. And one of those, the Leafs seem to have this endless supply of depth right now. I think there's been 7 different combinations on the fourth line. He is the most regular member of the fourth line, but last night he didn't look at all like a fourth liner.
From what I've seen from the Toronto Maple Leafs, their fourth line, that depth has made a little bit of a difference from last year. This show is a very Western Canadian focus. So there's one guy on Toronto that a lot of my listeners are going to be asking me about after this conversation. That's TJ Brody. Maybe a little word to what you've seen from TJ so far this season.
Solid, quiet, which is TJ Brody, as most fans would know. He's not a guy that is looking for headlines or makes headlines, but I think he's been a stabilizing force. The analytics guys are saying that pairing could be better, but you know what? I like what I've seen from him and Morgan Riley. I think they had the one tough night in Ottawa that was not particularly good, but a bounce back game the next game and just solid, rock solid since. And I think that's an area where the Leafs have been vastly improved. They're a better defensive team. They're better protecting the leads, and I better in the third period. And I think when you break it down, one of the big reasons for that is TJ Brody.
It's weird that he picked number 78, but we sure missed number 7 on the Calgary Flames ourselves.
I want to ask him about that because I don't get that 78, and all I know about it is it's the first and only Leaf in history to wear that number.
It's quite the pull from TJ Brody, but that's TJ Brody for you. Let's go to the other team in Ontario there. We knew that they were going to struggle a little bit throughout this season, but yet they're a little bit of a scrappy bunch and got themselves a good win against Montreal. Maybe a word of what you've seen from Ottawa in the beginning of the season so far.
Well, I've been disappointed until last night because that's the kind of thing I thought we'd see more of from Ottawa, and they did it to Toronto in the second game of the year for the Leafs, and I think everybody expects them to be 7th, and no surprise there. But I thought they might be a team that could be a difference maker, and who makes it and who doesn't. I think they can be a reason for teams to stub their toes. I'm not sure why they went as veteran as they tried to go in the first 10 games of the year, but last night they kind of maybe under some level of pressure or maybe just to change things up. They tried to go younger last night, and I think that promise of the future started to look pretty good last night. Obviously, Stützle is a guy that we're going to get excited about for years, and I was a little worried a week or two ago that you have this, outstanding superstar potential prospect, and he could get bogged down in the mire of a team that's really scuffling. But he seems to have risen above that a bit, and now has scored in 3 straight, and a 3-point game against the Canadians, and a guy I can't wait to see live coming up in the near future.
Yeah, me neither. He is quite the talent. He showed that at the World Junior Championships, and it looks like he fits right in with his Ottawa. And maybe that's because he's part of this youth move they have going on in Ottawa right now. But it seems that one Brady Tkachuk has done more than just be a part of the youth movement. He seems to be leading the charge. Maybe a thought on what you see out of Brady Tkachuk.
I mean, he's a guy that you can't help be excited about. He's just like his brother. I think he's captain material. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. Battle level's great, but offensive talent as well. Obviously, he's as big a part of what this team's going to be as just about anybody. I mean, for him and Stützle and Thomas Chabot, those are cornerstone guys that obviously make Ottawa fans optimistic about the future.
You mentioned Thomas Chabot, and it's like you're reading my notes because that's where I'm headed next. He's not talked about a lot across the league quite yet, but I believe there might be a future Norris winner in Thomas Chabot. What say you about Thomas Chabot so far?
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of Thomas Chabot. In fact, I was suggesting early on, and it's a tough spot for him to be in to garner this kind of attention because there's a lot of moving pieces around him, but I think there's going to be a time, and I don't expect there'll be an all-Canadian division going forward. I wouldn't mind seeing it, but I doubt it will happen. But I could see among the Canadian teams, Thomas Chabot being considered the best, if not one of the top 3 defensemen in this division. I think he's that good now, and his upside is that much too. And I've seen some Canadian Olympic team projections. I've seen some with them on there and some without, and my Canada might include Thomas Chabot.
Mine definitely does, but I might be a little biased in my take of Thomas Chabot. I'm a huge fan of his, so it's been good. The other side of the scale, you've seen Montreal Canadiens, more of a veteran group. Don't really have a big superstar like a Tkachuk or a Chabot, but they've definitely got some good talent down the middle of Montreal that have come along slightly. What have you seen from the Canadiens so far in this season?
When this cap thing started to play its way out, where you saw teams going to the top of the cap, and they've got, like the Leafs, 3 or 4 guys that are the top heavy cap teams. I often wondered if you could design a team that had that upper mid-range talent that was not poking into the $10 million player category, and whether the depth of that kind of team throughout could be a difference maker. And Montreal, I think Marc Bergevin's designed that perfectly. I mean, they don't have a McDavid, they don't have a Matthews, they might not have an Elias Pettersson. But they do have a 4-line depth. I mean, their 4th line will be the best in this division, maybe the best in hockey. They've got 3 strong pairings right now, and Victor Mete kind of in and out as the 6-7 guy. This team's got a lot going for it. It's even deep in goal. Really impressed with the Canadians, and I don't think it's going to be long before we're talking about Nick Suzuki as one of those superstar players either. And everything Marc Bergevin's touched has turned to gold so far this year. Josh Anderson has come as advertised, and Tyler Toffoli even better than advertised. All the additions have been terrific, and it's a pretty solid team right now, even with the loss against Ottawa, which was maybe just a night where they took their foot off the gas.
Might be a nice wake-up call for them last night as well.
Yeah.
Around my circles and talking with a lot of people that I've talked to, one common thing we talk about Montreal is you can't really tell who the first line is from the third line, because all 3 of those lines work so well together to the same goal and in the same vein. Maybe speak on maybe the depth on the middle as well for Montreal, where they have those 2 young guys, and then
Well, I mean, I guess you could argue how you number lines, and a lot of coaches don't like to number lines. But if you're calling the line of Corey Perry, Tyler Toffoli, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi the third line, is there another third line in hockey like that? I mean, Toffoli's been amazing. Corey Perry looks better to me now than he did in the bubble last year. And I thought Perry struggled early in the bubble, but as the games went on, he got better, which is kind of his pedigree. And by the Stanley Cup final, he was outstanding. And he's at a different level right now than he was in the summer. So he's thriving in the environment in Montreal. So yeah, that is a third line. And when you've got, Armia's hurt, or he might be on that line. And one of those guys could even be, Perry might be on the 4th line, but to have guys like Paul Byron on the 4th line, Arturi Lehkonen, who's as good as a penalty killer, and Jake Evans, who's a youngster who's become a terrific penalty killer. All the elements on that team. They've got a shutdown center like Phil Deneau, and they've got scrappy guys like Brendan Gallagher and Anderson, who can really cause havoc in front of the net. It's a team that plays with speed, but now it's a team that has some size too. And I think Montreal's become a much tougher team to play against than they've been in the past.
For sure. That Montreal team has a guy on each line you just hate to play against. They have Gallagher on one line, Anderson on another line, Corey Perry on another line. I just can't imagine matching up to those guys every night. That's incredible. You mentioned their back end and their pairs they have going together, and it seems that one guy back there in Shea Weber's kind of found a fountain of youth a little bit, and he looks like the Shea Weber of old. What have you seen from the Habs captain so far?
Yeah. I mean, knock on wood, he's healthy, and that makes a big difference. But he is, I mean, he's had an outstanding career. I'm a little disappointed they gave him the silver stick last night. I was hoping Montreal would kind of say, Shea, we're going to give it to you, but we want to give it to you next year or when there's fans in the building, because he's the kind of guy that you want to see saluted by 20,000 fans, because he's had that distinguished a career, and he's on top of his game right now. I did the game in the Olympics in 2010 where he literally pounded a puck through the net at the Olympic Games, and that's the kind of shot he has. I mean, they want to unleash that shot a little bit more on the power play, and I think we'll see more of that. But that's the kind of leadership guy too that makes a huge difference, and another reason why the Canadians are going to be tough to beat.
He's quite the leader for that group, and I think the right leader at the right time for that group. Let's flip over and talk about another leader here. I'm not sure how much Winnipeg games you've been able to see, but Paul Maurice sticking up for his captain this past week. What say you about Blake Wheeler and the Winnipeg Jets so far?
Well, I think Winnipeg's an interesting a team. We just talked about Montreal's depth up front. I would say that you could make a case that the Jets are even a better top 9 team than Montreal. They might be the best top 9 team in the division. I think Blake Wheeler gets overlooked a lot of times, and I think there was some fallout with the Line A deal, and rightly or wrongly, he absorbed some blame for Line A wanting to leave. The one thing about Blake Wheeler that might surprise people, if you go back, and I'm not sure of the exact period of time, whether it's 7, 8, 9 years, but there is an extended period of time that if you look back on, and Blake Wheeler is 5th over that time period in points in the National Hockey League. Number 5, which I think might surprise a lot of people, but that's how consistently good he has been. A couple of 91-point seasons. I'm a fan of his, and I understand what Paul Maurice was doing. I think maybe a little bit of the criticism on the one play was merited, but I think what the coach was trying to say was, let's cut some of these guys slack, because they do a lot of remarkable things too. And I think the Jets are an interesting team. I'm not sure everybody had them in their top 4 at the end of this season, but right now they're looking pretty good. They're not guaranteed anything, but you put Pierre-Luc Dubois in that lineup, and it'll be interesting to see how those lines are formulated, because they can be a dangerous team offensively, 3 deep with Adam Lowry on a 4th line, and Adam Lowry's not a 4th liner, but I mean a terrific shutdown line. It's going to be interesting to see how he configures his lineup, but he's got a lot of great options, because there's a lot of talent on that team up front.
Yeah, they're definitely making my preseason prediction look really, really bad. So I'll take that one. I'll take that loss, I guess. I'm not sure if you watched the game last night versus Calgary, but Winnipeg looked really good. That top 9 that you alluded to, the depth looked really good. And now you're going to add a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois in that mix. How do you see that shaping up for Winnipeg?
Well, with Paul Stastny there, I don't think he can play on the wing, and it's a 1-year deal. So that eventually it's going to be Scheifele and Dubois, or Dubois and Scheifele down the middle, which is as good as it gets in an all-round way. It's not McDavid Draisaitl, but that's I'm not sure when we'll see a McDavid Draisaitl again in the near future. But it's very, very good. Would you see Scheifele with Dubois in the short term? I'm not sure. I'm kind of curious to know if Pierre-Luc Dubois is comfortable on the wing. But again, you've got a great goal scorer like Kyle Connor. You've got Nick Ehlers playing better than ever. You've got Wheeler. You've got these 3 outstanding centers. So you compare those three combinations. That's why I was thinking Lowry and Kopp, but Andrew Kopp suddenly is a guy that is showing a huge offensive upside. So, but they play so well together in a shutdown role that I don't think any team wants to have their top line playing against. So again, great options for Paul Maurice.
Absolutely. There's a very intrigued how that shapes up in Winnipeg there. Another team that we see a lot of shuffling of the deck, a little bit of controversy around Sam Bennett, but the Flames have gone to that where they've stacked their centers up rather than create a big top six. What have you seen from Calgary in maybe kind of what people are calling a disappointing start for them?
Well, what I'm not seeing so far is the team that was in the bubble, and I saw a feisty team that gave Dallas everything they could handle, a team that was tough to play against, and I don't think they've been as good at that department. But it's early. I think they've got as good a goaltender as there is in the division, and they might have as good a blue line as any team in the division. So I'm looking for a little bit more upfront, a little more feistiness. I mean, they've gotten a good opening 10 games out of Johnny Gaudreau, and I think he was really in the spotlight to start the season. I think he's answered some questions, but you mentioned Sam Bennett. I think that's one of the missing pieces. We saw playoff Sam, and we don't see the same guy regular season Sam, and I don't have the answer for why that is. I do know if he could play in an 82 or a 56 game season like we've seen him play in the postseason. I think it's 11 goals in 30 games, so that's a 25 goal pace or around there. That he'd be a valuable guy, and I'm not sure why it hasn't happened consistently in Calgary, and it's going to be interesting to watch to see if they move Sam Bennett and what you get for him, because those are the kind of trades that could net you something significant, but it could also come back to haunt you.
With the injury to Derek Ryan last night as well, that could give Sam an opportunity to be what he's looking to be. So we'll see how that shapes up for sure. I wanted to go to the back end and talk a little bit about one guy on the defense, a guy that was signed in the offseason that I had to be sold on, but now I'm a huge fan of. What have you seen from Chris Tanev that's helped him solidify that Flames D-core?
Yeah, he is kind of a guy you got to just keep watching, don't you? Because like TJ Brody, a little bit different, but like TJ Brody, he's a guy that I think the more you watch, the more you get an appreciation for him. And I'm not sure if it's, pardon me, coincidence or not, but I think he was a huge stabilizing factor for Quinn Hughes that Hughes may be missing so far this season. But just a solid guy who doesn't get a lot of attention. Had the huge overtime goal last year against Minnesota, and then scored I think the longest goal against a goalie so far this year. I think you may have to call that shot to make it count, but it did count, and good for him. But I think Tanev gives him. I think it's a nice top four defense. In fact, I think that's a pretty solid six-man defensive unit right now for Calgary. I like it a lot, and I think Noah Hannafin's raised his game so far this season.
You can see all the guys happy and very happy for Chris when he scored that unbelievable cross the ice goal there he had. So pretty good there. So interesting to see how that continues to and how he can stay healthy and in the lineup for the Flames the whole year. Injuries have been a bit of an issue in the past there. His old D partner and his old team, they kind of look like they're struggling a little bit. Your thoughts on Vancouver early in the year?
Yeah, you know what? I think there are some fans that said, they lost Tanev, they lost Toffoli, they lost Markstrom. This is expected. I wasn't as certain that this team was going to fall back like they have because it was the best team in the bubble, Canadian-wise. And I thought we were still going to see growth from Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, guys like that, Brock Besser. And right now, it's not looking good. There is the alarm bells are going off. Let's be honest. And I'm not sure structurally why they have been as poor as they've been in the last couple of weeks. I was just doing a Vancouver radio show, and I mean, I understand why there was only cautious optimism after sweeping Ottawa. I get that, but then they go in last Saturday and completely outplay Winnipeg and looked like a team that was figuring it out. So a week ago, I thought they were on the right track. They'd won 4 in a row. They beat a good team in Winnipeg, and things were starting to look up. But that's a tough week. They've obviously been manhandled by Montreal, and it didn't get any better on Thursday night in Toronto. That might have been one of their poorest performances. The Leafs really dominated that game from start to finish.
It's a hard job, I think, there in front of Green to get that team going in the right direction. I'm not sure how he does it, because they're such an up and down team, but when they look good, they look really good. And when they're poor, they look really poor. So we'll see how that shapes up in Vancouver.
John, I was going to say they don't have a lot of time, because I think next week's critical with 4 games against Calgary. That's one of the teams they have to finish higher than. I mean, if teams can't handle Toronto, Montreal right now, and that's not saying they won't be able to, but there's still 2 playoff spots available, but you got to be better than 2 teams. You got to be, if you're Vancouver, you got to be better than Edmonton, Calgary, or Winnipeg, 2 of those 3 teams. And so the time to make hay is next week with those 4 games against Calgary, and vice versa. Calgary's got an opportunity to really put them in a hole with those games next week.
That's a really good point as well, because Vancouver has played the most games within the division too. So now if they're going to make the hay, they've got to actually beat those teams they're in competition with. Yeah. Interesting for Vancouver going ahead there. So on Saturday, we're going to see our first Battle of Alberta. We've already talked about Calgary, so let's talk about Edmonton just really quickly here. You mentioned McDavid and Draisaitl. Of course, they're having themselves a good season. What about the other parts of that team? What have you seen from Edmonton outside of McDavid and Draisaitl?
Well, it was a slow start, and I think there was some concern early. I think it's being alleviated a little bit, largely because of how good the dynamic duo is. But I think Kyler Yamamoto has stepped up, and he's become a reliable guy. And I was in Edmonton last week, and I thought Dominic Cahoon started to play the way they were hoping he could with Draisaitl. And so that was a step in the right direction. McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, we know all about. Koskinen has kind of weathered the storm here a bit, and then Mike Smith sounds like he's not very far from coming back to help out in that department. The blue line's been a concern, but I noticed Tyson Barrie looking a little more comfortable the last couple of games, which the Oilers are going to need from him. He struggled in Toronto. I don't think he got off to a great start with Edmonton, but again, the last few games, he's starting to feel comfortable. I think he's got the I don't know if green light's the right terminology, but I think he's got more of an opportunity than to play his game in Edmonton that he might have early on with Mike Babcock, and he really struggled in the first 23 games under Babcock last year, and got better under Sheldon Keefe, but the die was kind of cast for him in Toronto. But I'm starting to see the guy that played in Colorado and had a 50-point season, at least the last week I have in Tyson Barrie, and the Oilers sure could use that.
Really looking forward to that game on Saturday in Calgary, Edmonton. It should be fun. Should be lots of fireworks. We spend a lot of time, obviously, in Canada here talking about this all-Canadian division, this North Division. Have you been able to keep an eye on the things going on down south there?
You know, there is a time when I say I've got to pay attention, because you get so tunnel vision on this division because there's so much happening. You want to keep track of everything, and it has been so much fun. So I have kidded at times that there's 24 other teams, but all of a sudden you pay attention, and David Pasternak's back, and he's filling the net, and Cale Makar is, even more spectacular than he was last year. And you want to see more of that. And you start thinking about the Olympics next year and Cale Makar on the Team Canada blue line. And so there's a lot happening, and there's some concerning things too with teams having COVID issues and being put on hold. So yeah, some good things and some bad things. And once in a while you do have to pay attention south of the border because there's lots of stuff going on.
I think Elliot Friedman said it best when he was on Hockey Night in Canada a couple weeks ago, where he's like, it feels like I'm covering a 7-team league because the focus is all Canadian all the time. So it's quite interesting at that. So before I let you go here, because I know we're up against time here, I just wanted to maybe do a little bit of a self project and just ask you what you would say to young broadcasters who are trying to break into the business, or young guys who are trying to follow in your footsteps or Jim's footsteps. Do you have any advice you'd give out to them?
Well, the foot in the door is the hardest thing, and somehow you've got to create that in any way possible. I got a lot of luck. I'll make a long story longer. My first job in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, I got because a friend of mine put an ad in a trade paper way back when there was a radio broadcast newspaper, and there were a lot of want ads. And he put one in for a sports job, and actually the CJGX in Yorkton reached out and said, send your play-by-play tapes. Well, he went to school at McMaster and did radio there, but they didn't do play-by-play. I did at my university at Queen's, and so he gave me the forwarding address. He said, you got a tape, you send it in. And so that starts the ball rolling. I mean, and I got a season in the Saskatchewan Junior League that helped me get better. I got noticed by Hockey Night in Canada because I was doing soccer games for a team owned by Molson, and Molson owned the broadcast arm, the production company that did Hockey Night in Canada. So it was not a path that was obvious for me. But I knew that, I wanted to do play-by-play at any level. And I often tell people to diversify and specialize, completely different, be able to do anything in the business, but in that, focus on one thing and try and make that something you're better than most people at. And so when I started, I was willing to do anything, but I wanted to get good at play-by-play. And so a couple of things that I think I've met young guys that there's a fellow I've met, and I've screened some tapes of his in Detroit, and just a small college kid out the outskirts of Detroit. Lucky enough, the Red Wings allowed this because they've got lots of room in their press box, and most teams wouldn't. But he would take his tape recorder and call Red Wings games, and I've, he sent me a few tapes, and I noticed the difference as he got better and better. And you don't have to go to a Detroit Red Wings game. You can go to a Brooks Bandits game or whatever. You go to a Alberta Junior game, a SJHL game. You can go down and call a minor hockey league game at any level, but maybe up in the top seats of the rink, and just learn from your call, do a period, go back home, listen to it, have somebody else listen to it. I lived in a house with 5 guys at Queens. I think I drove the other 5 guys crazy when I was listening to my game tapes over and over again. But you learn to pull the weeds from the broadcast, what works, what doesn't, and kind of polish the product. And there are people out there listening. I know there were times when I didn't think that was the case, but I was recommended for a job in Montreal because Kurt Kielbach, who was the voice of the Winnipeg Jets, he had worked at CJGX in Yorkton and was driving through at one point and heard this voice on the air and thought, wow, wonder who that guy is, and found out a little bit about my story. And when he was asked by my future boss in Montreal if he knew anybody that out west that was interested in working cheaply in the Montreal market, he said, well, I know this I know of this guy from Yorkton who I think moved back east, and maybe he's interested. So it was a complete indirect recommendation, but somebody out there was listening when that voice was going out into the airspace. And again, you need some luck, but if you put yourself in the right position, sometimes luck will follow you around.
Very cool story. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for your time today, Chris. I really do appreciate you sitting down with me for a few minutes and sharing your insights and your stories. I'll let you go now because I know you have things to do and run, and we'll be watching a Hockey Night in Canada. Thanks so much, Chris.
Hey, John, great pleasure, and all the best to you and the folks out there watching. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into another edition of the Double Digit Hockey Show. This is John Easthope, and I will talk to you guys next time on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, John.